Good afternoon. My name is Diane. I'm from the Aging and Disability Resource Center here in Dodge County. Our speaker, Marty, is a former Wisconsin governor, an award-winning author of My Two Elaines, and a crusader for Alzheimer's caregivers. He is on track to give 120 presentations this year at conferences, civic organizations, senior communities, libraries, and more, all to spread awareness about the heroic work being done by caregivers. Marty will use humor and compassion as he shares lessons from his ongoing decade-plus journey as a caregiver. Let's welcome Marty.
Well, thank you, Diane, and good afternoon to all of you. So, really nice to be with all of you here in Juneau, right, in Dodge County. This is really special. This is, by the way, this is, for me, the very first talk that I am giving now in Juneau in Dodge County. And so I'm very proud about that, but if you look around the room and see all the people here, this is the largest group that I ever have talked to in Juneau in Dodge County. And so the fact that you all came out, it makes me feel sort of pretty good. Now, there are some people here who heard me speak before, but stayed anyway. And so for those that did hear me speak before, I would like to tell you that the message could be different, but because Alzheimer's is the same as it was when we were together last time, there's not going to be too much change in the presentation. So if you can sort of bear with me and give me encouragement, you know, like thumbs up and so forth. Well, what's your first name?
Annie.
Annie.
Lulu.
Okay. And what's your social security number? Anyway, this is sort of good to be here. First of all, ADRC. I want you to know that the Aging and Disability Resource Center, what a wonderful lifeline, what wonderful caring people in the organization. And I say that because as I have visited with different caregivers, and as I have been with people on this journey, the concern and the anxiety and the worry, and then to know that there is a resource like the Aging and Disability Resource Center, it's a godsend. Now, they, like any of us, cannot wave a magic wand, but they can be there to give us the kind of assistance and guidance that sometimes is so necessary. But then I also want you to know about the Alzheimer's Association. They have an 800 hotline 24/7. And so that number is in our book. I think you all got a copy of the book, but that's in the book, and also alz.org, which is the Alzheimer's website. You can also text into them and then do some research and maybe get involved in a pilot project and a study or so forth, because they desperately need people to be involved in the study so they can understand different things going on in people's lives where there might be a pattern. So if you could understand that. Now let me just tell you a little bit about My Two Elaines. The book, you receive a book for free. The reason I'm sort of sitting down is that my legs are getting as old as I am. And so, but the book, if you need any extra books, they are $10 or 3 for $25. And they are ordinary retail price $16.95. And through the good graces of the Aging and Disability Resource Center, they gave you one. And I should tell you, so you know, that any profits from the sale of this book go to support caregiver support groups. I'm not a book salesman. I'm someone who feels so strongly about helping caregivers learn, cope, and survive. And then, as I have explained before, if you read the book and you think it's going to be helpful to other caregivers, if you don't mind going to Amazon and Twitter and Facebook and so forth and give it a wee like, okay? If you read the book and you don't like the book, I also want you to understand that there are people who have picked up this book, started to read it, and could not put it down. And, well, I'm going to explain how that happens. Here's, in January, remember how really, really cold it was? Really cold, miserable? Well, first of all, you never had weather that bad under my administration. You applaud now, where were you in 1978 when I really needed you? But anyway, so it was so cold in January, but here's what happened. We were running short of the book. And so I called the printer, I said, we need as many books as you can get off the presses as soon as possible. So he worked, and finally he got the books done, and he delivered them. But you see how shiny this book is? That's a varnish, like a lacquer on there. And so what happened was, I put so much pressure on the printer getting done early that he did not leave the varnish dry, and it became sticky. So people picked up this book and they started to read it, and they wanted to put it down. And they couldn't put it down, it was just stuck with it. And so, well, here's what happens, it becomes further complicated. What happened is the people who bought the book and couldn't put it down, they wanted to go outside. But they couldn't put their hand through their coat pocket, through their coat arm, because of the book on there. And so what happens, they put their arm through the right side of the coat, and they had to drape over the left shoulder, so they had to walk around like this. Well, what happened is that there are now 49 cases of frostbite that I'm being blamed for because people walk around outside with this book stuck to their hand. But it becomes further complicated. If you go to McDonald's and you ask for extra pickle sauce, they don't have any extra pickle sauce. But the reason they don't have any extra pickle sauce is those people who got frostbite on their hands, those are people that are supposed to work and till in the garden to produce pickle plants. Well, because their hand was hurt, they couldn't work in the garden, and therefore we have a bad pickle production. And so for those of you that like pickle sauce and you want to go to McDonald's, you have to blame the printer being back there because he didn't let the stuff dry. That's a long explanation. What did we learn by that? We didn't learn anything now. My first experience with dementia, well, that goes back 40 years almost to the day when I was running for governor. And I have explained before, and those of you that have heard us talk before, please understand, this only happened once and I have to talk about it. But anyway, so I gave a campaign talk in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. And now I'm done with the campaign talk. And when I'm done, this elderly gentleman comes running up to me, and what he actually does is, he taps me on the shoulder. He says, Governor, he said, that had to be the world's most god-awful speech I ever heard in my whole life. His wife heard that, and you could tell that she was embarrassed. So she came rushing over. She says, Governor, she says, please excuse my husband. He's old and he's senile, and all he does is just repeat whatever he hears everybody else say. So anyway, I want you also to know that we do have the CD, and I do the reading, and Elaine's words are in here. My daughters, Kathy and Christine, read her, and my son, Matt, reads his and his brother's voice. And so some people tell me that the CD is helpful to them as well. And so if I tell you about my two Elaines, the first Elaine, that was the girl I met when I was a freshman in high school in Latin class. And I knew right away she was the one for me. I knew that. And so because of that, we dated and we went steady and we got engaged and we got married, and 4 children and 13 grandchildren and now 6 great-grandchildren. My friend, my advisor, everything that you could ever want in a partner. Understanding and caring, everything. Well, if I would run for political office, she'd be the hardest working campaigner, and if I would lose, she would never let me feel defeated. So that was the first Elaine. The second Elaine began to appear some 14 years ago when she would get lost driving to and from places she had been going to for the last 15 years. The second Elaine began to appear when, as a great cook, she would mess up recipes that were embarrassing to her, and she was just so concerned. The second Elaine began to appear when she would back the car out of the garage and scrape the side. And the second Elaine began to appear when she would put the car keys in the dishwasher. And so she was diagnosed some 12 years ago, is now in her third year at assisted living memory care in Milwaukee. And so I was on this journey with her over these course of years. And as I traveled this journey, and I look back, there were some things that I realized I learned too late. There were some things that I didn't learn soon enough. And one of the most important things I learned was that if Alzheimer's is bad, ignorance of the disease is worse. And when I say ignorance of the disease, I don't mean ignorance of the disease by the people who study the brain, the neurologists and so forth. When I say ignorance of the disease, I'm talking about the medical profession that many times does not understand when there is a diagnosis of Alzheimer's, there are two patients, the caregiver as well as the person who is ill. When I talk about ignorance of the disease, I'm talking about churches that may not be involved in creating a dementia-free environment, a dementia-understanding environment. I'm talking about employers who don't understand through their employee assistance program what more they could be doing for caregivers. I'm also talking about lawyers and financial advisors as well, but I'm also talking about caregivers. We simply did not understand. I did not understand. So Elaine asked me once, she says, how are my parents? Well, I said, Elaine, I said, your parents are both dead. Well, the shock on her face when she realized that maybe she didn't say goodbye to her parents, maybe not even go to the funeral, I promised myself I would never put her through that again. So now she asked me, how are my parents? I say, Elaine, I said, I want you to know your mom is really happy. She likes working at church. Your dad likes the sports. Elaine said, oh, that makes me feel so good. That makes me feel so good. That's therapeutic fibbing. Therapeutic fibbing. If I would have thought about that 57 years ago when I first got married. But I came to understand that therapeutic fibbing is an important thing to know about. And so this man is driving in his car and he comes across a body in the road. And he gets out and he looks very seriously injured. So he calls 911 and he says, look, he says, you have to send help right away because there's a body in the road very seriously injured. The 911 dispatcher says, okay, he says, we are, he says, where are you? Well, he says, I'm over here on Pistachio Street, but send help right away. The dispatcher says, okay, sir, how do you spell pistachio? Spell pistachio. He says, get help right over here, so I can't spell pistachio. The man on 911 says, he said, the dispatcher says, look, he says, we have to get the emergency medical team to the right place. How do you spell pistachio? The man says, never mind. He says, I'll call you back in 5 minutes. The dispatcher says, call back in 5 minutes. I thought you said this man's so seriously ill. Why are you going to call me back in 5 minutes? The man says, I'm going to drag the body over to Elm. I tell you that story because not everyone knows how to spell pistachio. Not everyone knows about this disease. And because of that, it becomes so important for us to understand the disease a little bit more. Let me just inject for a moment. You know, I said this is the largest crowd I've ever talked to in Juneau and Dodge County. And also, you know, the evaluation slips, I filled them all out for you. And I want you to know that you have given me the highest ranking of any audience I've ever talked to. And so I want to thank you for that. But anyway, in learning how to spell pistachio or learning about this disease, let me tell you what I think happens in the life of a person who is ill with Alzheimer's. If you can envision for a moment a funnel. And if you put the small part of your funnel by your eye, and as you look up, and of course because the funnel expands, when you look up, you can see the blueness of the sky and the hope of tomorrow. And what happens as this disease progresses, that funnel becomes inverted. And now the large part is by your eye, and you look out, and you see just a little bit. That then becomes the world, the life of the person who is ill. If they don't understand that, they ask you the same question 5 times in a row over the course of the last 3 minutes. They don't understand that they put the keys in the dishwasher. All they know is that this is what is right in front of them. They also don't know or anticipate what should be happening 5 minutes or 5 hours or 5 weeks from now. And so that then becomes their world. So there's a story about a hippopotamus and a butterfly that fell in love. And they're about to be married, and the hippopotamus is beginning to think about the consummation of the marriage. How do I do that? Well, that's going to be tough, so he seeks out the wise owl. He says, wise owl, he says, I'm going to be married to this butterfly, and I want to consummate the marriage. How do I do that? Well, says the wise owl, you change yourself into a butterfly. So the hippopotamus accepted that advice, began to walk away. Then, how do I do that, thinks the hippopotamus. Well, he goes back and says, wise owl, how do I turn myself into a butterfly? And the wise owl says, get lost, Buster. I've just determined policy. Okay, I've just determined policy. What I am telling you is policy. What I am telling you is very difficult. But what I am telling you is one of the most important things I think that we as caregivers can do. And that is to let go of the person who once was and is no more, so that we can be in a position to embrace and take care of and love the person who now is. If I could have understood that sooner and let go of the kinds of expectations and so forth and hanging on and hanging on. Now, it's very difficult, but I want to ask you, if we are candid with one another, what else are we going to do? Are we going to lose faith? Are we going to give up? Or are we going to try and understand this disease better? There's a saying that rather than worrying about the storm to pass, to try and learn how to dance in the rain. No caregiver will ever dance in the rain, but there are things that we can do. For example, I talked about therapeutic fibbing, but also getting rid of the word no. No one wants to hear the word no, much less someone who is going through the process of worrying about what the future might be. So it's 9:30 in the morning. Says, I would like a glass of wine. No, you can't have a glass of wine at 9:30 in the morning. That's not the answer. The answer is, Elaine, do you want red wine or white wine? Do you want it in a tall glass or in a smaller glass? Do you want to drink it with your neighbors, or should we call over your sisters? In other words, through redirection, avoiding that word and that confrontation of no. And then you get right down to what is wrong with a person having a glass of wine at 9:30 in the morning. They don't know it's morning, afternoon, or evening anyway. But then to also understand, if Elaine had 5 coats on, and she tells me that she's too cold, but she's perspiring, there is no intellectual discussion that I can give her that 5 coats is too many and 6 coats is going to be more than enough. Easy enough to give another coat. Kathy Brighton Butcher, a co-author, who helped me take what was in here and help get it into book form, and I were giving a presentation at Barnes & Noble in Milwaukee. And in the course of that presentation, a woman stood up, and I came to find out that her name was Lisa. And Lisa stood up and said, you know, she says, my dad has Alzheimer's. And she said, I get a call from my mom who says, Lisa, you have to come home quick. And she says, I'm at work. Mom says, come home quick because dad is acting really strange. So Lisa said she rushed home, got home as quickly as possible, and she went into the home, and sure enough, here her dad was in the middle of the living room floor, and he was going. She said, Dad, what are you doing? Well, he says, I'm fishing. Oh. What are you fishing for? Well, I'm fishing for walleye. Lisa said, I asked her, can I join you? He said, sure. And so Lisa said she went fishing. And she said she had one of the best interactions with her dad that she can ever remember having. Because in essence, her heart was touching his heart. Well, now the episode is over. And now she's leaving. As she's leaving, her mom says, Lisa, what do I ever do if this happens again? And Lisa said, I told Mom, get in the boat with Dad to join his world. And so that then becomes so important. So Elaine and I are having lunch, and over at assisted living in the cafeteria, lunch area, and she begins to cry. I said, Elaine, I said, why are you crying? Well, she looked at me and said, I'm beginning to love you more than my husband. I didn't ask her what's wrong with your turkey husband. But the fact of the matter is, she does not have to know my name in order for our hearts to touch. Many times we get the question, caregivers get the question, does it hurt you if, or it must really hurt you, if your wife doesn't, or your husband doesn't, or the loved one you're caring for doesn't know who you are? It does. Maybe once, maybe twice. But here's the point. If we have a loved one who breaks their leg, we cannot expect them to win a 100-yard dash. If our loved one has Alzheimer's, we cannot expect the same thing of them that once was. And so we can take it as a body blow every time they don't know our name, or we can say, wait, we understand that the brain is broken, and we understand that this is a different person. And we also understand that this person has maybe no more understanding of me than anyone that would walk in off the street. So we've dealt with that. So if Elaine doesn't know who the children are, that's okay. If she doesn't know who the grandchildren are, that's okay. If she doesn't know who I am, that's okay. Because she's a different person. And so it is going to be so important that our hearts touch in every way that's possible. And so the other day I'm sitting with Elaine and we're looking out out the window and watching the leaves blow. And I'm thinking, oh boy, if Elaine would be better, we would be probably out in Colorado, you know, looking at the mountains and watching the leaves blow and so forth. And I'm thinking, yeah, if I'd be out there, I'd be holding her hand and I would be telling her how much I love her. And then I'm thinking, well, that's what I'm doing right now. I'm holding her hand and I'm telling her how much I love her. And I said, we're looking at the trees blowing like we probably would be doing it in Colorado. And then I'm thinking, you know, this is really neat, because I don't have to go through the airport screeners and have me take off my shoes and have them caress my body to make sure I'm not going to blow up the world. And then I'm thinking also, not only that, but I don't have to worry about renting a car in Denver, Colorado to drive into the mountains. And then I don't have to worry about getting the motel or the hotel where we're staying. And I don't have to worry about going out to eat. And I'm saying, wait a minute, this is something. To steal moments of joy from this disease where we are right now. And we can do that if we set our mind to it. But I want you to know it's policy. I want you to know it's very, very difficult, but it's also so very important. Another thing I try and spend my time doing, and that is to give Elaine every assurance. I try and avoid the word no every way. In fact, if I get it out of my vocabulary, so much the better. Don't use the word no. But also to give her assurance. So the other day she says, do you love me? I says, yes, I love you. Will you keep me? I says, yes, I will keep you. Well, how long will you keep me? Well, I want to give her every assurance. So I said, Elaine, I will keep you forever and ever and a billion years. And then she looked sad. I said, why are you sad? She says, I don't think I could take you that long. But anyway, of the 10 killers, Alzheimer's is number 6. It's the only one that cannot be cured, delayed, or prevented. But I want you to know that they think there is a medical miracle going on as far as Elaine is concerned. Because as I said, Elaine and I had lunch over in the cafeteria. Well, one day we're having lunch in the cafeteria, sitting at this table, and right over here there's a doctor and there's a nurse, sort of in earshot, so we're all minding our own business. But Elaine gets on one of these discussions, telling me how intelligent and good-looking I am. Well, what happened? They never treated me like that in Juneau. But anyway, so they heard her tell me how intelligent and good-looking I am. And so do you know what they did? They wrote a letter to the New England Medical Journal. And they said, Elaine Schreiber is getting better because they know that her husband is intelligent and good looking. Well, the people at the New England Medical Journal, they are no dummies. And so they said, they wrote back and said, you have to show 3 things where the person is getting better, not just 2. Well, a little bit of time goes by, and again, it just so happens Elaine and I are having lunch at the same place, and it happens that the same doctor and the same nurse are here. Now we need to get someone on these, but how did we ever meet? How did we ever meet? I said, Elaine, we met when we were 14 years of age. I fell in love with you right away. I said, I wanted you for my wife and the mother of my children. You were beautiful. And I said, not only that, if any boy got within 50 feet of you, I bopped him on the head. And she looked at me and she says, you're a bullshitter. Well, now they had the 3 things. You're way ahead of me. So they had the 3 things. So if you pick up the New England Medical Journal around February, maybe March, you're going to see maybe a picture of me and so forth, and Elaine on how she actually is getting better. Now I'm going to cover something about caregivers and what caregivers go through. One of the challenges that caregivers have is guilt. And one of the reasons that, well, there's 2 reasons I think why caregivers feel guilt. One reason is we think that we are the only ones that ever get upset with our loved one because of the repeat questions or just because of the caring for our loved one. And so through the Alzheimer's Association, I had an assigned mentor. And by the way, this mentor was a lawyer who took care of his wife and out of the blue got a heart attack. And he and I both attribute it to caregiving. And by the way, a caregiver, they tell me, has a 35% chance of dying before their loved one. A caregiver is more apt to become ill than other caregivers, more apt to have their savings eaten up, and more apt to have a challenge at work because of trying to balance out their caregiving, the finances, all of the extra challenges and time-consuming things that go on. And so to be a caregiver is very important, and it's tough work. But in addition to that, we carry this guilt. One reason, as I said, we think we are the only ones who get upset, so I called up my mentor. I said, do you ever feel like just screaming? He says, not only do I feel like screaming, I actually scream. And that helped me, because I know I'm a human being and I'm not the only one that gets upset. But then another reason that we feel guilty, that is because, you know, the disease, as you know, is progressive. So what happens is we give our love and our attention and our focus, and we wake up the next morning and we're 5 paces backwards. Well, I got to do more. So you work harder and you give more attention and more focus. And again, each day is a new day, and now what am I doing wrong? And if you remember, I talked about this funnel switching over. That's the same thing that happens, I think, in the life of many caregivers. We become so focused in trying to do a good job for our loved one that our focus becomes so much on our loved one that we don't go to the gym anymore. We maybe don't go for a walk as we should. We maybe don't go together with friends. And that increases the intensity of everything we are about. And not only increase the intensity, it leads to irrational irritability. It leads to an increase of cortisol, which is a bad thing. But believe it or not, as a caregiver, you're worried, you're involved with a lot of things, and you're producing more cortisol. What can cortisol lead to? Dementia, of all things. And so caregivers have to understand they're heroes, they're doing an outstanding job, and they cannot and they should not feel guilty. Now, I'm going to ask you here in Juneau 3 questions. And I'm going to help you with the answers because every one of the 3 questions will be answered yes. Okay? I think you can do it. All right. Have you heard of Martin Schreiber? Yes. You're terrific. Have you heard of Martin Luther?
Yes.
Does Martin Schreiber and Martin Luther have the same first name?
Yes.
Great, you did great. Okay, understand me, because this is very important. Because Martin Schreiber and Martin Luther have the same first name, I have given myself the ability and I have given myself the authority to tell you that therapeutic fibbing is okay and get rid of the guilt. Okay? If you can understand that, that is very important because that's one of the things that you and I have to, as caregivers, do for our good health. Now, did anyone ever think that on October 25th, that we would be here together in Juneau? I never thought that with the ABRC. Did any of you think we would ever be together here? I didn't think so. But here we are. Now, what the point is this disease takes us to places we never thought we would go, never thought we would be. And so it's important to understand that because it does lead us on different paths. When I was elected to the state senate back in 1962, and I was appointed to the education committee, and one of my responsibilities was to go to Washington, D.C. for a meeting. And if you would take a 5:30 in the morning airplane out of Milwaukee, you could go to Washington, go to your meeting, and come back on the same day, which I was in the process of doing. And so now it's 5 o'clock in the morning, and we are boarding the airplane. Ahead of me is this very distinguished gentleman. You can tell he had a lot of money, very important, Brooks Brothers suit, really classy silk tie, nice white shirt, cuffs, everything. As he gets on the airplane, he says to the stewardess, now we call him flight attendant, says, does this plane stop in Detroit? She says, yes, sir. We stop in Detroit, passengers get off, passengers get on, and then we fly on to Washington, D.C. He says, I have to get off in Detroit. She says, fine. No, he says, I have to get off in Detroit. She says, I'll help you get off. He says, look, I'm inclined to fall asleep. I cannot miss getting off in Detroit. She says, I'll take care of it. He says, do you promise that you will get me off in Detroit when we land there? She says, sir, I will take care of it. Well, now we land in Washington, D.C. And here is this distinguished looking gentleman. As he gets off of the airplane, he walks up to the flight attendant, he takes a swing at her, and he berates her with some of the worst language I ever heard. Well, I walk up to the flight attendant, I says, my gosh, that man is certainly angry. And she says, he's angry. You should have seen the fellow I put off in Detroit. So this disease takes us where we never thought we would go. Sometimes we feel deserted by friends. Sometimes it could be my fault as a caregiver because I didn't keep bringing my friends up to date on what was going on. But understand, maybe our friends with our families grew up together because we enjoyed sharing camping and canoeing. And so now all of a sudden, we're at the point now where my wife has Alzheimer's. My interest no longer is camping and canoeing. So they're sort of in their area. I'm now trying to deal with Alzheimer's, and now they're maybe not calling up enough, I'm not calling them up enough, so I'm beginning to feel deserted. And so I'm thinking, that's horrible. They're deserting me. But then I think, well, wait a minute. Maybe I didn't help educate them. But certainly our interests are different. But then maybe it's important that I get kicked out of the canoeing and camping nest, that I get kicked out so I can now become involved maybe with ABRC, or maybe with the Alzheimer's Association, or maybe with a support group, or maybe with a mentor, or maybe with another person who is on the journey so we can share. And so it's important for us to understand that yes, things once were like that, but now we're on a different journey. If, hypothetically speaking, you would decide to take up fly fishing, what would you do? You would try and learn as much about fly fishing as you could, or about baking bread. And the fact of the matter is, because our loved one has Alzheimer's, we owe it to ourselves to find out more how we can best handle this disease. And so we have to understand that if Alzheimer's is bad, ignorance of the disease is worse. Rather than worrying about the storm to pass, to try and learn how to dance in the rain. And so we're going to wrap up at 3 o'clock, and we're going to have time for questions. And what I'm going to try and do is repeat the question so everyone can hear it. If you ask me a question that I do not know the answer to, I will rephrase your question. So you will not be there will be no question I can respond. So feel comfortable about that. What I want to do is to let you know that before, and I want to just take a moment to introduce Kathy. Kathy Bright Butcher is the co-author with me. As I said, she helped me take what was in here and in here and get it into book form. But also, she wrote a book about Bonnie Blair, the Olympic champion. She's a former newspaper reporter, former freelance writer. She went to Iowa State. No, I wasn't. So she's just, now, before, I want you to give her a round of applause. But here's what when you give her a round of applause, not only for being a great writer, but someone told her, Kathy, you started out as being a great author, and now you're ending up driving Miss Daisy. She treats me like I'm her great-grandfather, and so sometimes she has her moments with me, even though I'm perfect. But anyway, so we wrote the book, and we're ready to go to print. And lo and behold, if I don't find a series of notes and journals that Elaine had been keeping since she was diagnosed, and we were able to capture some of those notes and put them in the book. Now, I want you to know that we had prayed together and we had cried together, but never did I understand the courage that it takes for someone diagnosed with this disease to continue forward. But also never did I understand fully the anxiety, nor the worry, nor did I understand how important I was in her life. And therefore, because I am beginning to understand how important I am in the life of a person who is ill, I can tell every caregiver here, you have to take care of yourself. What good does it do for you to die off before your loved one? What good does it do for you not to be able to have the mental agility and to be able to have ways of thinking about how we steal moments of joy from this disease? And so there are a number of notes that we put in here. We begin each chapter with notes from Elaine. And so I'm just going to read a few of them, and then we'll open it up for questions one at a time, a little bit. What I did was I took all of the notes that I wanted to read from Elaine, and I photocopied them because she's out of the window. Because, oh no, she's not, I'm sorry. So she gets very nervous when I fumble around with the book, and she thinks I'm going to drop everything on the floor and so forth. So I can do this to put her mind at ease. Anyway, so Elaine wrote this a letter to her dear loved ones on March 11th of 2009. And here she writes, it wasn't until a few weeks ago that I really had to say, yes, I do have Alzheimer's. I had read of signs that indicate Alzheimer's, like getting overly upset for no reason and having trouble with names and directions. But I still didn't think it was a problem for me. But in hindsight, for too long, I've been getting lost driving, having trouble keeping days straight, and difficulties with names and schedules. Still, I still felt I could handle it. It won't get worse. But this morning, I started reading about the mid-stage of Alzheimer's in hopes of preparing myself better, and realized I am not very far away. That is most scary, but I have to accept it. One of the things she did, she wrote a note and put it onto the bathroom mirror, and she writes, I would be so lost without you, so please continue to take good care of yourself, for me as well as for you. Here she writes, I'm so lucky he's a good cook and seems to enjoy making healthy and delicious meals. It's a good thing, as my Alzheimer's isn't getting any better, so cooking and baking with steps that need to be done are no longer easy for me. I hate to think I'm getting worse, but I must be. And then she writes here, Marty is still a very good husband, and I can't blame him for being a little short sometimes. It has to be a problem for him. It puts more responsibility than he can handle sometimes. But he knows I'm trying my best, and he tries hard to help me. I know it's no easier for him than for me. So, as I said, she starts out by saying, Marty is still a very good husband. Okay, I'm moving on now. I'm not enjoying my role anymore as Marty's wife. Because of his having concerns about my Alzheimer's, he doesn't let me be me. He doesn't let me go for a walk if I want to, or to the store alone. I used to appreciate him when I thought was concerned, but he holds me captive much too much. I'm going to try to have a second opinion because I really don't think I have any problem. I know how to drive or walk any place I want to, but he doesn't believe me, and I hate the control he has placed on me. But now my favorite one, and then we'll open up for thoughts or questions. This one here is my very favorite one. And she wrote this one on July 3rd of 2012. She writes, "Life is good, and I plan to have it continue that way until my children tell me it's time for a nursing home or something like that. This is realistic with what my Alzheimer's book says about my future. But till then, I will try my best to be normal, whatever that means, and keep my happy side of life always continuing. I'm lucky to have such a good family and many friends to help me get through all this. And so another great day to thank the Lord, and smile, smile, smile." So that's my two Elaines for an update. I want to thank you very much for the opportunity to be with you. It's energizing for me. It's cathartic for me. It's just good for me to have a chance to be with you. So any questions or comments, we'll try and do our best to respond. You don't have to have any questions.
Can I get a selfie with you?
A what?
A selfie?
A selfie with me?
Me and the little with you. When we have time. That's a picture, camera, like this.
Cut it out. Wow. Anything else further? So, gosh, that doesn't happen all the time that people would want a selfie with me, It actually does. Anything further? By the way, I never had that before.
Really?
No, never did anyone, not during an official presentation. They may have snuggled up to me and said, "Could we take a selfie with you?" Yeah, I'm never so bold and brave. What's your social security number? Yes.
How are your kids doing with it?
That is a great question. The question is, how are my kids doing with it?
Yeah.
I told you that we wrote the story, and then I found Elaine's notes. Well, I thought I told my story, but then I found Elaine's notes, so I thought I told her story. I was not smart enough to talk with my children, to ask them how they were doing and how they were coming along. They knew that I was having a tough time physically, but I never really spent the time visiting with them. And so there is in the back of the book an epilogue in which I have asked each one of them to write just a little bit something. But one thing that I have learned, which is so very, very important, and I learned this through my counselor was the Alzheimer's Association. What I learned is everyone handles this disease a different way. And so I have 4 children, one daughter on the East Coast, one daughter on the West Coast, a son in central Wisconsin, and a son near Milwaukee where I live. And so each of them handles it a different way. And I'm meeting with the counselor, and what I really understand is that they have to handle it their own way because they're losing a mom as much as I'm losing a wife. And so my one son wants to remember mom as she once was. So he doesn't enjoy coming to visit at all. My daughters, because they live on the coast, sometimes they're worried whether it's genetic. I assure them that it is only an aspect of it, but it's not proven to be genetic. They come to visit and spend as much time as possible. My son Matt tries to visit mom at least once a day. And so all of them handle it differently. Elaine has 2 sisters, and she had a brother who passed away, but during the time, all 3 were there. Each of the 3 of them handled it differently. And so my counselor went on to say, and this is so important, the idea of letting go, the counselor went on to say that I have no right to dictate to anyone how they handle this disease, because everyone's trying to work it out their own way. Now that doesn't mean I can't ask them for help, but I certainly cannot dictate to them how they should handle it. But that question that you ask is a very important one, because it's another thing that caregivers have to work through in their mind, and that is, how is this adjusted? Now, I met with someone earlier who was saying that, I'm trying to remember your first name. But anyway, the point being that sometimes my daughters who were far away, they would talk with Elaine and she would be doing everything she could to hide it. And so my daughters were thinking I was the one who was losing it and we were all right. And so as we learned, it's so important for everyone to be on board with what's going on. 1 minute, I've got a sign of 1 minute. Yeah.
When it's going to be time to get a third.
That's another great question. How do you know when it's time? I met with the counselor and I said, I cannot see putting Elaine into a home, and the key word there being putting. The counselor says you are not putting Elaine anyplace, you are giving her an opportunity to be who she is now. So I meet with the counselor also, and we talk a little bit about this in the epilogue. And basically, if you can envision a balance scale, when the health of the caregiver or the health of the person who is ill becomes out of whack, the caregiver went on to say, can Marty Schreiber's 24/7 nursing home care take care of Elaine and help her be who she is now? Never. I was being run down, I was irritable, I had to sleep by the door for fear she was going outside, so I had decent sleep and so forth and so forth. So finally my children had an intervention with me basically and said, you've got to do it. Now, most, and I would say 99 and 9/10% of all of the assisted living facilities have people who have gone through this before, and they can help you decide as to the best time. Any time is the worst decision of your life. But I have to tell you, it's better than trying to continue to have the health and the life of either the caregiver or your loved one being affected. So there is no magic writing on the wall which says now is the time. And for those of us that have children, if you can remember the first time you took the 4-year-old to kindergarten, how painful that was because your whole life is changing. Now there's young girls going out into the world and so forth, and how that bothered us. Well, it's triple that, quadruple that. And so, but it is so very important because it has to be done. The caregiver owes it to himself or herself to preserve their health and well-being for their loved ones. And this business about till death do us part, I believe in that, but by the same token, I don't think that we're ever expected, that caregivers are expected to commit suicide, which you may be doing if you try to take care of this person on your own for a period of time coming. So, okay, you have been just really outstanding and is so helpful and kind. I'm trying to see if there was anyone here old enough to vote for me back in 1978, but they're really, if you were? Oh wow, you were too slow. Whoa. Well listen, thank you. You're just outstanding and appreciate everything. Take care.